we got to speak to our fears. We got to speak to our fears. Right? I don't left the text. Mhm. Fears that somehow black folk are just criminals by definition. Fears, right? That black folk are these leeches, right, who only want a handout. Right? So if we understand how the value gap organizes our social world, right, we can then socialize our children in such a way that they can mobilize efforts to respond to it, right? As opposed to just simply assume that it's oxygen, that they have no agency in relation to it. This is what disturbs me about the Coates book, right? There's a way in which Ta-Nehisi describes white supremacy that you don't know how to muster the resources to respond to it, right? Because it's not, it doesn't just seem to be a practice. It functions almost like an ontological fact. It's like air, right? And I don't want that, right? I don't want that because so when Ta-Nehisi confronts his son, right, after the non-indictment of Darren Wilson, right, he just tries to give him the resources. Well, you just got to struggle and keep questioning. My son's at Brown, right? I'm a Morehouse man, and he just wouldn't look at Morehouse. I think there's an emphasis on decency. If we can just have some decent, good human beings. I don't want to say Americans are evil, right? But I do want to ask the question, given all the suffering and the willful blindness that we exhibit in relation to that suffering, are we fast becoming a nation of monsters? Um, but I do want to say it's not just simply individual behavior. As you rightly note, it's also structures, right? It's also structures. But that's a longer conversation. Yes.
Professor, thank you so very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I know it's in the water in Flint, but what was in the water in Pascagoula? I think that what you said is very marvelous, but I have a problem with what you're saying.
Sure.
And it is. It seems to me that if we really look at things carefully, white America is in great denial and practices deceit. How do people who practice deceit confront themselves in the way that you're talking about when fear is so prevalent?
Yeah.
That's what I hear in the Donald Trump people. Those are fear people.
Yeah.
You know, they're people who really don't have the ability to look at themselves honestly, but they perpetuate myths and they engage in denial. I don't know what you're talking about, brother.
No, I hear you. That's real. That's real, and we have to make that known. You know, what was in the water in Pascagoula? You know, Mississippi is a metaphor for America, Richard Wright said. Um, how can I put this? I tell my students all the time that when we normalize nonviolence as a response to white supremacy, we lose sight of the miracle of his invocation. And one of the great scandals, and Baldwin said this, one of the great scandals of Black life is something that we often fail to admit, and that is that for the most part, a lot of Black folk don't like white people. And we have a reason not to. We're very skeptical. As Baldwin say, why should I risk my life that you're gonna be human today? And so I'm trying to give an account of that, of the what you voiced. But when I was on the Diane Rehm show, uh, just a couple of days ago, there's a brother who called in from South Alabama. And I figured he was probably from Grand Bay or Mobile, because I grew up on that I-10 corridor. And he said that he was part of forced busing and that he encountered, he's a white Southerner, and that he encountered a side of town that he didn't know even existed. And what he began to what he gave voice to in light of that experience gave me hope. Baldwin says at the end of Fire Next Time, it is the relatively few of us, the relatively few conscious Blacks and whites who must, like lovers, work hard to achieve our country. He's not saying it has to be all of us, right? It could be us in this room, and we can do the work. But to me, I have to have that faith. Otherwise, I'm going to drink too much Jameson. I got to have that faith. I don't have, it is my undying and unflinching faith in our capacity to be better that gives me hope. But I'm not naive. I get a line from Du Bois's Souls of Black Folk in Of the Passing of the Firstborn. It is a hope not hopeless, but unhopeful. Right? We got to do the work. We got to do the work. Ever since Seattle with WTO, there's been organizing going on in the United States that gives me hope. So there's Seattle, WTO, there's the anti-Iraq movement, right? And of course, that organizing, the object of it became Obama in 2008. He jumped in it, right? And all of that organizing that was preceding him, he became the object of it. So when he got elected, folk didn't know what to do. They got demobilized. And then all of a sudden we get Occupy, right? That energy shows up again. And then Occupy, Zuccotti Park, right? And then Black Lives Matter, right? So there's organizing going on the ground in very interesting ways. And politicians have been trying to navigate it, figure it out, at least on the left, right? Obama, I don't want to say he deployed that energy in particular sorts of ways that has now, that energy has figured out his limitations. I'm being trying to walk around some things, right? And so now what we see is organizing at the local and state level that's going to really have a fundamental impact, right? Bernie Sanders' campaign isn't something that just showed up, even though the mainstream media will let us believe that it is, right? This is Occupy energy. This is grassroots organizing energy. I just don't want us to get caught up in the 4-year election cycle or the 2-year election cycle, right? So in the book, I actually suggest something very controversial. And I wrote it at the moment in which I thought it was going to be Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, right? But I want to speak to your, because I'm saying we need a strategy for the streets, a strategy for the courtroom, and a strategy for the ballot box. We have to change our orientation to the vote, right? Voting is not just simply an act of piety. People died for it, so you got to go, right? And voting for African Americans has always been a kind of, how can I put it? We've participated in the democratic process in a distorted and disfigured way, right? Political scientists have described us as a captured electorate, right? Because what? We typically vote overwhelmingly Democratic. The Democratic Party specifically focuses on turning us out, getting us to the polls, right? And then they have no obligation to deliver policy. None. For the